As children head back to the classroom, more parents seem willing to get their kids vaccinated against COVID-19. A new Axios Ipsos poll shows 68% of parents have or will likely vaccinate their children when they're eligible. That's a 12-point increase in just 2 weeks, suggesting U.S. vaccine hesitancy may be dwindling. The poll also found 20% of Americans say they are unlikely to get vaccinated. That's down from 34% since March. While strides are being made in one part of the pandemic response, another is seemingly slow to garner attention. A new report from The Atlantic details the frustrations inside the battle against long COVID. That's when patients are suffering symptoms for months after their diagnoses. Some COVID long haulers are feeling science is failing them and are now aiming to transform the medicine and the research into their conditions. Ed Yong and Hannah Davis join me now for more. Ed is the author of that report. He's a science writer for The Atlantic who recently won a Pulitzer Prize for his reporting on the pandemic. And Hannah is the co-leader of the Patient-Led Research Collaborative, a team of long COVID patients working on research into their own experiences. Welcome. Hannah, let me start with you. For people who are not familiar with long COVID, briefly walk us through your situation. When did you first contract COVID-19? Do you know how? What are the symptoms you're still experiencing?
Sure. So I got sick in New York City in the first wave on March 25th. My first symptom was actually that I couldn't read a text message. And I actually thought I was tired, but an hour later I took my temperature and realized I had a fever. And I've had primarily neurological symptoms from COVID, and this was really something unexpected in the beginning when it was talked about as kind of a respiratory illness. But a lot of people with long COVID have severe cognitive dysfunction, memory loss, tremors, dysautonomia, which basically means very high heart rate on standing, dizziness, balance issues, tinnitus, ongoing fevers. I know people who have had fevers for over a year. And these are all the same things that I'm continuing to experience.
Well, Ed, in your piece, you point out the many unknowns about long COVID. What are some of them?
Primarily, I think what actually is the origin of it. We know that folks like Hannah are getting sick with the same virus behind COVID-19, but why that infection in some folks leads to these long, recurring, relentless symptoms is still, I think, a mystery. It's one that a lot of scientists are turning their attention to, but I think not quickly enough and not with enough coordination and not with enough respect and deference to the sheer amount of knowledge that folks like Hannah and other long haulers have accumulated in their own condition. They really are the experts here. And I think there needs to be much more bringing in of long haulers into research as equal partners.
And Ed, what is it that we do know about long COVID? You know, one of the questions I wonder about is whether it is something that affects only unvaccinated people, or if people who are vaccinated are also experiencing long COVID. And also, Ed, what do research efforts look like a year and a half out from this pandemic start?
So we know that there have definitely been some cases of vaccinated people who've had long COVID after breakthrough infections. I don't think anyone really knows what the rate is, but the fact that they exist at all should be cause for concern for all of us. I think a year on, there's some degree of patchy research going on. The NIH has $1.12 billion from Congress, I believe, to try and research the condition. But that is slow work. Though most of that money still hasn't been allocated to funds. And meanwhile, as you've heard, folks like Hannah are still sick. People need help right now. They need research. They also need social support to help them in situations when a lot of them can't work, can't afford to pay rent. This is a real emergency, and it's one that we can't afford to be slow and inefficient about.
So, Hannah, tell us about your decision to participate in long COVID research, and what has that experience been like for you?
Yeah, so very early on, we had really no answers. We had joined a support group called Body Politic, and we saw that a lot of people were experiencing these same symptoms, the neurological symptoms, the symptom called post-exertional malaise, where basically even if you do something very simple like wash your dishes, you have to get back in bed for the rest of the day. Um, and we didn't have enough information from anyone about this. It wasn't being talked about publicly at all. And so we ended up deciding to do a survey on ourselves, and the Patient Led Research Collaborative is basically made up of people who have either data or policy or analysis or other kind of research backgrounds. And so we wanted to put this out both for our long COVID community, but also to communicate to researchers really what questions they need to be asking. And it really does feel like we're ahead of the curve in many cases because researchers who aren't familiar with this condition make a lot of assumptions about what it looks like. And it really truly is not like any other illness, except for maybe myalgic encephalomyelitis, which also happens, is a post-viral condition that happens after viruses and infection.
So to follow up, Hannah, I mean, what specifically would you like to see done to better understand long COVID?
I really think that long COVID researchers need to be building on the backs of the research that has been done in myalgic encephalomyelitis and dysautonomia and other kind of post-viral conditions. Because these are really, really complicated areas of medicine. They are not areas of medicine where your average researcher is going to, be familiar with things, even just like, brainstem dysfunction or, elevated blood lactate. These are all really common or really well known to myalgic encephalomyelitis researchers, but really not to people who are starting to work with long COVID. And then the other thing is to listen to patients and listen to the questions that we think that researchers should be asking. We still see a lot of researchers just focusing on symptoms. What are the symptoms of long COVID? We're past that. We need to start getting into treatment and pathophysiologies.
Very quickly, Ed, what's been the reaction, to your reporting on this? Because Hannah talks about assumptions that are made by researchers. Researchers focus very deeply in one specific area. And as you point out in your piece, there is not sort of this holistic approach that Hannah and others like her would like to see. What's been sort of the sense in the research community?
I think a lot of the people I've spoken to have actually tried to reach out to long haulers and take their interests at heart, but specifically because I chose to reach out to those people. It's not the norm by any means. I think that basic science often works incrementally, and we don't have time for that. This needs to be a transformative, different approach to science that centers patients and their needs and that works as an act of service to try and meet those needs as quickly as possible. And that means not just listening to what questions they want answered, but also treating folks like Hannah as like equal partners, as experts in their own right, which, as you've heard, they clearly are.
Yeah, it's really eye-opening to read about the hurdles that these long COVID patients are dealing with. Ed Yong and Hannah Davis, thanks to you both. Really appreciate your time.